So we'll try this for now. Ethan, we're very happy to have you. This is our first of the semester, like I was saying before, no one could hear me, but we're very happy to have you. A producer from Silver Pictures. We're from Kent State University, an independent group, uh, sponsored by the school, student media, and we're trying to educate our students during COVID with professionals like Ethan. Uh, so Ethan, what have you been working on lately? Just to give our audience an idea of what Ethan Erwin does.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a film producer and writer, and I've been with the company for a long time. Before we go in the way back machine, the
Yeah.
most recent thing that we just finished was a film called Orphan: First Kill, which is the prequel to a film that I worked on about 10 years ago called Orphan, a horror film that had Vera Farmiga and Peter Sarsgaard, and it was directed by Jean-Michel Serra. And the new one we just shot up right before the end of the year in Winnipeg, in Canada, which was great. It worked, the crew there is great. And even though shooting through COVID and having to do kind of the pod system,
Yeah.
um, where everybody's kind of segregated from each other, we were able to get it done. There was only one day where it seemed like not only would we be shut down, but like the entire province
Wow.
was going to close all businesses. But we were able to speak with the government and get an exemption. So we finished our film, and it looks really good. I'm excited about it. One of the craziest things that we did. The original movie, if you guys have seen it, is about this evil little girl adopted by this family, and she was played by Isabel Furman. And when we were trying to cast that same character again, um, we looked at a lot of young actresses, really great young actresses, but it just none of them felt right, and we ended up casting the same girl, except now she's 21 years old, Isabel Furman, and she did a great job. And we shot it using a bit of prosthetics, a bit of kind of just forced perspective photography, and we'll add in visual effects to kind of make sure that she seems like she's a little kid in it. But I think it'll be great. I think it was the best possible way we could have done it.
I have to say so myself, not seeing anything, but even before like seeing it, I've seen the original. It's kind of been a classic in my household, a horror classic. But just if it works out, it could be the best de-aging process, like much better than The Irishman. And I'm sure you're not spending that much because I didn't think The
Our
Irishman was
budget
that
is,
great
is
with
less than The
de-aging.
Irishman. Yes.
I hope so. But yeah, that's a very interesting project just to have finished. But one of the first questions I have for you today, I might come back upon The Orphan because
Sure.
the way that you worked on that, because that's not a Silver Pictures film, correct?
It's from Dark Castle, but
Yeah,
Silver and Dark Castle are like two halves of the same company.
really.
One
Okay,
deals with more of the action, bigger movies, and then the genre horror films are put out through Dark Castle. But I've had I got an opportunity to work on both sides, which is
awesome.
nice.
Okay, that's something I was curious about. But my first question for you today, Ethan, is after high school, when you first got accepted to college at NYU, what was your idea of your purpose? Did you have a clear vision that was involved in film, or like if it wasn't film, was it something other than producing slash writing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew I wanted to make movies. I always had, I'm probably sure like all of you, always had, and just didn't know exactly what that meant. My parents are air traffic controllers and pilots, so down in San Diego. So I was not a part of the film world, but always loved it, and would make movies with with my friends, um, and took like a few summer courses in writing at very like at like USC and stuff like that, and like little film courses. So I knew I wanted to make films. I went into the Tisch Film School, knowing that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't know really what that meant, and I definitely didn't know what the job I currently do and have been doing for the last 15 years or whatever. I definitely did not know what that meant. Um, I think all I really understood was directing, or cinematography. So I was like, I'm going to be a director. And I went in, and then one of the great things about NYU versus some of the other big schools out in California, from the second you start, they give you a camera, you just go start making films. You do that concurrent with film theory, as opposed to some other schools, which you do 2 years of theory and then 2 years of practice.
Yeah,
So it
like
was great.
USC, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Without naming names,
I'll do
that
that
is
for you.
yes, yes. Um, and so yeah, it was great to be able to pick that up and start doing it. But I learned quickly that I didn't really like being a director. Like, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I liked putting the movie together. I like writing. That's something I still do and love. But like writing, like putting it all together, and then just saying, here, go make this and make it good and call me if there's a problem, which you can't really do when you're the director. Uh,
Yeah.
so I realized, I was like, oh, that's what a producer does. And so I knew going in, but there was a real kind of dark night of the soul. I don't know, after maybe the end of the first year, maybe midway through, where I was like, I thought I wanted to be a director because that's all I knew about, and then I realized I didn't, and like, what does that mean? What do I want to do? Unfortunately, doing making movies there, you have to play every role. On your the person who produced your film, you have to produce theirs, and you have to be hold the boom mic for somebody else, and so I was able to really try all the roles out and really liked producing.
And you also stick with writing,
Yeah.
and you still do it every now and then. So my next question that you have, uh, since it seems like US or NYU really helped you define who you are now, uh, what do you think helped you more? Like moving out to LA after college, even though you already lived there pre-college, but what helped you really determine this is what I want to do? Was it your courses and working with and trading off roles at uh, NYU at Tisch, or was it finally getting out there in LA and doing it?
A bit of both. I'd say more the actual experience of doing it. But what I didn't learn that at NYU, which maybe they're teaching now, I don't know, is just kind of the more business side of things, how you actually produce, how you actually put a movie together, how you can get financing, how kind of like the nuts and bolts of it. What I did learn, which was great, was actually when you're on set, what the roles of a production are, who does what, how you actually physically make a movie, and even a student film, with a 5-person crew, and Sherlock Holmes movies, which hundreds of people. At the end of the day, it's more or less just a scalable version of the same thing. So in that way, I learned a lot, and about working with people and about collaboration. But in terms of kind of doing the job I do, I really didn't know what that was until I started doing internships at production companies, including Silver, and until I really, yeah, just kind of was doing it. Like, there are things I was like, when I came out to LA, I grew up in San Diego, which is like just 2 hours to the south. So when I finally was like living in LA, I was like, I was like, oh, there's all this stuff that I feel like I never knew from school. Um, so that was the most helpful, was just being thrown into it. It's really just like a great grad school, basically, except they pay you a little bit of money instead.
Yeah. I ask these questions, like this question in particular, to literally all our guests. And was it always determined in your mind that you were gonna go to LA back home ish after college, or was there enough in New York that you thought you might have stayed there, or maybe tried like Atlanta or somewhere else?
I definitely thought about it, and I really liked New York, and I liked New York, and I also liked being in a scholastic environment. I like the structure of it because the real world sounds scary, and it's like, oh man, and I got to figure out how to pay my own rent and get my own food and pay for my own car, just pay for everything. Which growing up, I only had to pay for some of those things, fortunately. And but now I have to pay for it all, and how do you even start? It's just daunting. And so I really I applied to like law school, and I thought about could I do grad school, and then and ultimately those didn't pan out, which for the best. But no, I really wanted to stay in New York and do that. And in terms of like getting work there, it just seemed easier to get work in LA. And I had interned there, and I knew, again, because my parents only lived 2 hours away, that if things went really south for me, there was a safety net. Whereas if I was in New York, it would be a little more difficult.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely missed New York, and I had friends who did stay and got jobs there and did all right. It was just it was frankly just out of sheer kind of comfort zone that I was like, and I'd spent a couple summers doing internships. So like I knew my way around LA. Was just, yeah. So that made that decision a little easier.
Okay. And you already mentioned your internships, but what was the first step? Was it those internships? And what were some of the ways that you found those internships in LA? Were from uh, your connections from NYU right after graduation? Or how did those internships uh, come about? And did they
Yeah,
act
yeah.
as your first step?
They were. I think that, yeah, they really were my first step. I mean, other than, yeah, I mean, yes, they were. I mean, I through like one of my mom's cousins like had like a job at CBS, so like we got to go see like sit in the audience of some shows, and there were, and things like that, which was really nice, and it was really, really cool of her, and we got to see some stuff. But I didn't really get a real taste of it. Um, yeah, until I interned. The first internship I had was at Jerry Bruckheimer Films, and because they had made a bunch of movies I liked, and that's literally what I based it on. I'm like, hey, what companies made movies I liked? I'm going to email them and say, hey, I'll come work for you for free for a summer. And so between my sophomore and junior year, I interned at Bruckheimer, which was great. And I got a little place, in Santa Monica, uh, near there, and that I learned a lot actually because internships you do a lot of office work, but there's also a lot of running around town, running errands for people, and so that actually helped me a lot just to learn the layout of Los Angeles. Even though maybe what I was doing was just dropping off a script at a studio or doing this and that. And again, this is like the year 2000, so they people weren't emailing like to email a script was like an insane idea back then. Like that's such a huge file, you can't send that. You would just have to hand deliver it.
So you were writing scripts all the way right after college.
Oh, I was, yeah, yeah. But rather, this would be scripts that they wanted to send. The company
Okay.
was sending to another company.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, and then, yeah, I would know it was a good experience though, and I learned how a production company works. And you just kind of sit back and you see them make phone calls and get to see them do meetings, and like it was cool. And sometimes like there was a project that they were working on that was it never got made, but it was like Will Smith and Ben Affleck, and so both of them were there just hanging out, like working on stuff. And I like it. Uh, I think you learn a lot, and you have to know that it's grunt work. I mean, it sucks. It's just making coffee and copying pages and running around. The other one that was cool was then the next year I did Silver Pictures and Village Roadshow, which are both on the Warner Brothers lot. And again, this came out of just a cold call or an email where I said, hey, I'd like to, I like your films. I'm going to school and I'd like to intern there, and here's my resume. And and then just following up. Was how I was able to do it. And I interned at Silver in the summer of 2001, and that was great because it was at the time it was on the Warner Brothers lot, and I lived just up the street. I got a little place again just up the street, and it was really cool because yes, you have to go make a lot of run errands, but you're running around this place where they shot Casablanca and they shot all these enormous films like 2001, things like that. So it was really cool, and just to be in it, it makes it seem like it could be like it's possible and real, even though you're not getting paid. And again, the work itself sucks. You get to meet some cool people, and often the people you intern with, are people that you'll still still to this day are people that I am in contact with, and who those who stuck around continue to do business with.
How many of those internships do you reckon that you did? Was it just those two or three that you mentioned?
In film, yeah, it was just
Okay.
those, and I applied to a bunch of other places, just they didn't accept me. And then I interned. My father was really into like what he wanted me to learn more about business. So he had a guy he knew in New Jersey. So between my freshman and junior year, I interned at this like food company that makes like margarine and pickles in New Jersey to see how business. But I actually learned a lot about about just generally how an office is run. And that again is what I think you can learn from an internship, at a film company. You get to see people like actually doing the work of putting a movie together, which is a lot of phone calls and a lot of follow up, and it's not always the exciting, fancy lunches. It is a lot of just, it's like Glengarry Glen Ross, where you just have to constantly keep making calls and trying to get people to do stuff.
So we have our first listener question or watcher question. So this is from Daniel Skyminer, and he says, "How did you get to know Joel Silver? Could you give some words to describe your relationship with him?"
Yeah, I mean, it took a while, for him to even know who I was or learn my name. I mean, and just going kind of a little further back. So I interned there, graduated, came out, and my first job, I got a job at a temp agency, which I totally recommend. Not only because it pays the bills, but also it allows you to meet people and start building out a bit of a network. So I was lucky enough to get like a temp job that took me um, it took me a few probably several months before I was able to find work. But so keep that in mind too. It's not like right out the gate. And I was like, oh, I did these internships, I'll get a job immediately. But like when I came out, like that was not true. That was
Uh,
you need to pound the pavement still. But then I got hired to read scripts for Silver Pictures, and then at the same time I was also doing temp work for Universal Television, and that was great. But it was through my doing script coverage um, that I was able to kind of get into the Silver family. They really liked my coverage. They made me kind of their primary script reader, their in-house reader. And then from that, there was an opening on Susan Downey's desk. Her assistant was promoted, and and she was head of the company, and so I became her assistant. Um, I'm fully honest. I was not a great assistant. My
uh,
skill set is different than that, but it was fine. Fortunately, she recognized that I had other talents. Um, uh, but it wasn't really until I was kind of promoted off her desk, I think, that Joel and I really started having any kind of meaningful conversations, and that I was kind of brought into the creative circle. Otherwise, I was just like an assistant. But no, it was great working with Joel. He's the man's a legend. I learned a great deal just from watching him work and his tenacity, and something that he says in interviews, but it's something that he says, and it's true. The job of a movie producer is to every day wake up knowing that, and I'm probably butchering this, but every day wake up knowing that you're going to make 50 calls before lunch, and every single one of them is going to say no to you. And if you can get like one yes in a day, you have done your job, and it's like it's worthwhile. But it is a job that is totally full of rejection, and I think that is something that I appreciate, and but he was great, and the story, his stories of working on Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, and Predator, and all the movies that I loved, and Matrix, that was always great, and then to be able to be on set with him, and it was yeah, it's truly great. Again, the guy is a legend in the film business, uh, and it's a lot of fun to be on a movie set with him.
how were you about assisted, Ethan, after all your internship jobs? Just wondering.
I I was what it was. It was just in terms of like it was in terms of scheduling. It was in
Uh,
terms of like follow up. It was in terms of just like I think I was like whatever 22. I didn't know what I was doing, um, and it was little things. It was little things that I would mess up. I didn't burn her house down or anything,
thank
but
God.
like there was a premiere she wanted to go to that I forgot to put in the calendar and things like that.
Uh, but and I also have a question concerning Daniel Skyminer's question, which great question, Daniel. Is who would say no to producers? So you said you would go through 50 calls, and if you get one, that's good. Does that also concern? Like, would you say that also defines a job, even though Joel said that?
Yeah, I mean, the people that say no are,
Yeah,
you need this. You're trying to get the studio to say yes. You're trying to get some financier to say yes to this
yeah,
project that you're doing. You're trying to get an actor to say yes to something, or a filmmaker. You're trying to just get, you're trying to. A movie is like, it's as you guys probably know, even from just doing, student films. Movies are hard to put together, and once you put them together, they're hard to keep together. They like they want the second they come off the assembly line, they're trying to kill you. They want to come apart, and so you have to. It's just a fight, every day. There's movies that there are movies that I was certain were going, and we did it. We got it. We got a huge star. We got a cool director. We got the movie financed. We're gonna go make the movie, and something happens and it falls apart. You lose the actor, or a piece of financing falls out, or global pandemic.
Yeah.
And then there are movies that you'll be surprised by that are just dead, beyond dead. We're never making it. And all of a sudden you get one phone call that's from somebody who had said no before, but then thought about it. Was like, you know what? I do want to revisit that. And then you go make that movie.
And both of those happen to you, like,
Mhm.
rather frequently.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the former more than the latter, but
Yeah.
the latter has happened. But yeah, no, it's just tough. It's a slog every day. And, there's finite resources in terms of, the amount of money, the amount of the studio wants to commit to their development slate. So, you have to make your baubles more attractive than somebody else's. And so, yeah, it's really the producer's job to try and put a movie together. This is going off topic, and stop me if you want, but
You're
like the
good.
story I like to tell to kind of talk about what a producer does is this movie I worked on 10 years ago called The Book of Eli with Denzel Washington. And I was still just a junior executive, but we got this script in. It was a spec script by this writer named Gary Whitta.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was really good, and we really liked it. We took it to Warner Brothers, where our deal was, and said, "Hey, we'd like to make it." They bought it for us to make, and that's how it works. If you have a deal with a studio, they basically pay for the script and pay you to produce it for them. So we got the script. I worked on it with Gary, did some passes, and again, it's not just me, it's other executives at the company as well. But worked on the script, got it to a place we thought it was good and that we could find filmmakers, and then started going out to filmmakers and met with a bunch of people, heard a bunch of takes. When we met with the Hughes brothers, really loved what they had to say. They had such a kind of incredible vision for it. And we also knew that they, had made a film with Johnny Depp. And we're like, oh, great. He'd be awesome. He'd be great in the movie. And they have a wonderful relationship with him. So maybe we can parlay that. And so we, hired them and did another pass on the script with them, and then started going to cast. Went to Johnny Depp. He passed. Went to Denzel Washington. He passed. And then we were starting to talk about who else are we going to go to for this part. And as luck would have it, his son, Denzel's son, John David, who is now, star in his own right, had been home, and he was going through this stack of discarded scripts, and found Book of Eli and just started reading it. And he's like, "Hey, what's this?" And Denzel said, "Oh, it's something I passed on. I don't want to do it." And John David was like, "No, it's really good. You should take another look at it." And he did, and decided he wanted to do it. And so he came onto the movie, and we then started putting it together. And we ended up we made it in Albuquerque, and it was just the whole thing was a great experience. And I got to, as a producer, again junior producer at the time, but as a producer, got to develop the script, hire the director, was involved in the hiring of the talent. One of the other great things, actually, there was a it was right around the 2008 election. Yeah, it was around the 2008 election, and our main writer. So Gary, we finished with him. We brought in this other writer named Tony Peckham, who wrote Invictus, and he was working on it, but at the same time was working on Sherlock Holmes, which was shooting in London. So he had to go to London. Denzel Washington had notes on the script that he wanted to do, and so I went over to his house with my laptop and just like sat with him for like 3 days during election week in 2008, and was at his house on like election night in 2008, which was awesome. And in fact, he cut the thing short and said, "All right, I'm going to get on a plane to Chicago to go celebrate." I'm like, "That sounds wonderful."
Awesome.
But yeah, so yeah, it was cool. So I got to do that. Got to then be on set. Was also involved in kind of the in the casting of some of the other roles, in the hiring of the DP, production designer, and all that. And then was on set. Worked on some rewrites on set, and oversaw that. And then when it was in post, got to look at the edits and give thoughts on the edits. give thoughts on, work on, when they were doing the DI and VFX and, the score. And, Joel's big thing is he's really great in an editing room, and he's even better on a dub stage.
Wow.
So like during the mix and like really just listening to the cues and listening, just even just little effects and like sweetening those and heightening this and that. So which was great to, be a part of. And then down to the, approving trailers, approving marketing materials, one sheets, and then I wrote the back of the video box. I wrote
Awesome.
the copy that's on the back of that. And so yeah, as a producer, your job is sort of just overall quality control for the entire thing is kind of in a nutshell what a producer does. But from the time that like we got like I read the script and like said to my colleague Eric, I was like, hey, this script's great. Let's do this, to like going to the premiere, at the Chinese theater. It was, it's pretty great. Yeah, to be a producer when it all works right.
Yeah. Was that one of your first ones that you saw from inception to completion?
Yeah, I think that may have been the first. Like I was involved in projects when they were like scripts. Like the first two I worked on as an assistant, but I at least but I got to I didn't contribute as much, but I got to see it go from script all the way through to production and finished film. Was House of Wax, with the Jama Colette Sarah directed, and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which were both done around the same time.
Awesome. And also, so you could kind of say that well, not the only reason, who knows what could have happened if Denzel passed, but John David Washington really kind of saved that film in a way.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean it definitely wouldn't be the movie that it is without him.
Yeah. Yeah,
And he's a
that's,
co-producer on the film for that reason.
I never realized that. And
Yeah.
how old was he at the time?
Oh
Probably
God, I mean it's 2008,
teens. Yeah,
2009.
shoot.
No, I think he was probably, maybe he was maybe early
18. Yeah.
early 20s or something. Yeah, he was young.
Yeah. Wow. Just those turns in production, how it can all change. But we also have a question from the amazing Jeannie, and she says, any advice for getting involved with film production during college? So, what did you do to stay involved as possible, as you could, Ethan, while at NYU?
To in terms of like working on like local/student productions, I would volunteer, and I got actually pretty good at producing, so to the point where people were asking me to produce their films. Um, and so there was that, and then in terms of like I tried to get like a PA gig on bigger movies, but it was harder. But I would like send in my resume for like when they were shooting Spider-Man in New York and a few other films, but I still think it's valuable. Like a PA job, again, terrible work, grunt work, but is you learn so much and you get to really see how kind of everything gets done, from the ground floor. So I would, if you are aware of productions coming to, wherever you are at the time, be it if it's at Kent State or if it's going to be like if you're socially distant schooling and it's elsewhere, I would definitely recommend seeing if there's productions that are going to be visiting, especially if you live near a hub like in Atlanta or in Albuquerque or one of those places. I would highly recommend if there's any productions going on, just reach out to them. They appreciate cold calls as much as it seems like they don't, because they like people who will work for cheap, or even as like an office intern, in the production office.
And that
So
hasn't changed since you've
yeah,
been in college.
no,
It's
and I think it was the same thing 30 years before that or whatever. So
yeah. So my next question is from me is, oh no, that's not my next question. Like, what does your daily life as a producer consist of, Ethan? Uh, Other than all the phone calls, what else do you do as a producer?
I do. I mean, it's a little different every day, but it's also kind of the same. It is, yes, it is always phone calls, a lot of meetings, reading a ton of material. You read dozens and dozens of pieces of material a week, be it a full screenplay or just like an outline or a pitch of some kind, an article. I'd say that it is, yes, a lot of my day is spent reading. We do, and apparently we're crazy. I thought everybody did this. but my company does two. I have us do two staff meetings a day, one at noon and one at 5 usually, where we are essentially, just strategizing, talking about all the, everything we got going on. We have a big one once a week where we literally just run down kind of detail wise every project, what's the status of it, what are the next steps of it. But yeah, every day it is trying to kind of keep each plate spinning, and then at the end of the day you get to the end of the line and you got to start again in the next morning, keeping those plates spinning, and making sure this director deal that's supposed to be happening is going, or there's like a TV deal that we made, but like the actor isn't happy with their back end, so try to resolve that. So it's a little different every day, and when you're in production, it's harder because you have to focus on the movie you're making, but you also still have all that stuff you got to read, and you still have all these other things you got to be doing. Um, and it kind of feels like you're cheating on the movie that you're making right now, like to be reading another movie's script like when you're on set, but you have to. There's no other way to do it. And advice that I had received was that I think is good is always make sure you have other stuff lined up, because while you're making a movie, you're like, yeah, I'm making this movie, and it's like the be all end all, but no, it's not. Like you have to have other stuff lined up when that's done. But to answer your question, the day in the life of the producer is talking to lots of people, trying to get them to do stuff, and just incrementally moving your projects along.
In that form of communication, 2 meetings a day, one at noon, one at 5. Again, sorry about messing with your 5
No,
today.
no, no. That's fine. That's fine. We just got to do it earlier.
I appreciate it, Ethan.
Yeah, yeah.
But just that form of communication, like I was just wondering, like if that didn't exist, like I can't even imagine how hard your job would be if you're like how many people are at those meetings, like of that group?
7. There's
7.
7 of us.
So if you guys just weren't that connected, I can't imagine what would happen to Silver or any other production company,
Oh
because
no,
that
yeah,
seems so
yeah.
essential.
You has to. You have to. You always have to be in communication. Always have to be talking. Um, and yeah, it's and when you don't, that's as with any kind of system that's a somewhat complex system. Yeah, there can be breakdowns in it. So it is important that you guys that you get everybody on the same page. I think is one of the big things as a producer, or at least if not the same page, you at least have a mostly unified goal.
Yeah. And we have one question from a viewer, Daniel Hollis. He says, when you're reading scripts, is there something specific that you look for that really convinces you that the story has potential? What do you think, Ethan?
Uh, yes. I mean, there's several things, several factors that I look at when I'm reading a script. One just is there good writing? Is it is it a story well told? Is there a mastery of language? Are the characters and even if not, are the characters intriguing? Does it feel different or fresh? And then also just conceptually, is this cool? Is this something I've never heard of before, or does this subvert my expectation? Um, yeah, I think that's definitely something, you know, uh, and if you're lucky, you have one of those things, and if you're very lucky, you have several of them. You very rarely do you get like great writing and dialogue and great character, and it's a really great concept. Usually, it's one or the other, and which is why you have so many writers do rewrites, because you have a script that has a great concept. Maybe it wasn't so well done. Then you bring in this great writer who maybe not would not be known for that kind of concept, and try to marry those voices. But yeah, and the one thing I would say about reading scripts is just like, or working for me at least, working in film in general and film and TV in general, is it makes pleasure reading more difficult. I don't think it's the same for everybody. For me, I find it tough to read something that if I don't think I could turn it into a movie, because I'm like, this is a waste of my time. Like,
Yeah.
so it's hard to, even if it's a book that I'm fascinated with on a subject that is really interesting to me, I can't. It's hard for me to get through it because I'm like, I should probably be reading these other things. And there's always going to be more to read because it is a constant flow of material, um, from writers uh, and filmmakers, pitching things.
Have you ever produced or like kind of greenlit a film that kind of fulfilled none of those boxes, Ethan?
Not
Just wondering.
none of the boxes,
Okay.
but we've put into production movies that were like, what a great concept. We'll
Okay.
get there. We'll get there on the script. But we can make the movie right now. And sometimes you do get there and it's great and no one knows. And then sometimes you don't get there and everyone knows that you didn't get there. Generally, it's harder to get a movie greenlit if it's like such an awesome script, but there isn't really a hook to it. I mean, if it's an awesome script and you've got great cast, then yes, then you can get it made. But yeah, I would say typically typically if you go into production on a movie without the script being right, you get into some trouble.
Yeah.
You really have to
I've
fix these
found that
problems
with
before
my
you.
own
Yeah.
shorts.
Oh yeah. No, you have to have your script right, and you have to be well prepped because once you start shooting, that's it. Like the roller coaster is going, and it don't stop.
Have you ever, this is kind of cheating on this question, but have you ever just pushed something forward that you've even known that the script isn't ready just because everything is ready and you can't really hold back any longer?
100% yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
Just
I
wondering.
mean,
You
I
have to say
have,
it
and I
was.
think everybody does. I think because you're like,
Okay.
because it's an alchemy, and you have to like do it at the right time. And if not every element is correct, I think you still have to like give it a try. Because it's it's I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, and it's if you have enough uh, going for it, I think it's worth trying to move it forward. Yes, because you'll never get the perfect thing. You'll never get that perfect situation. I mean, sometimes you get it, but it's rare. Because an actor only has this window, or the filmmaker only has this window, or the studio, or the tax rebates are going to run out in this state, or whatever. So you got to shoot it now.
Just have to go sometimes. But my next question is, what are some traits that you believe that a producer needs to have to be successful? Like organization seems like an easy one, like being very good at communicating, like
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about before. What other traits do you think that you have or that you need to work on to be even better?
I mean, I think tenacity is important, and just sticking with it, and just constantly pushing that boulder uphill. I think just keep making those calls, keep pushing people. You send the script to somebody and they haven't read it yet. Keep trying to get them to read it, and keep trying to get that yes. I think that affability to a certain degree is important in the sense that you know we're not mining coal, and we also aren't curing cancer. Like we're making movies, and while we should take it seriously because it's a job, don't take it so seriously that you become a real raging jerkweed about it. I think always, try to have a good time. Try to, it is still at the end of the day fun, and you're making movies, and try to remind oneself of that. But no, I think a great producer, yeah, as you said, great communication skills, great, have a nice, great network of friends and talent you can call on, be it writers, be it filmmakers, be it cast, agents, studio executives. Really build your network out. I think the best producers probably have a very wide network. And even though I've been doing this for a while, I'm still trying to expand that every day and meet new people and and even during the pandemic, reaching out, just cold calling people that I've never met, but like I admire what they do, and I would like to talk to you about what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one question that I've been very curious about is why more production companies don't follow the Blumhouse model of kind of producing like not really horror films specifically, but just films on a very small budget that usually produce big dollars. So I was wondering why Silver Pictures hasn't really like tried that or experimented with that concept, and not even maybe not even Silver in particular, but you really don't see many trying to do that. So what do you think, Ethan?
A few reasons. I think a lot of people
Okay.
are trying to do it. I just don't think they're as successful. I mean,
Okay.
we did a film at the end of 2019 that we just sold to a streamer that is this that's kind of Blumhouse size that we did for with this director Simon Barrett. It was his directorial debut. It was called Seance, starring Suki Waterhouse, and it turned out really great. And so this is kind of our foray into that. But even like Orphan, the new Orphan movie, is like $10 million.
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough, certainly when you have like a big producer like Joel, sometimes it's tough because, you expect a certain level. When you've worked long enough, you expect a certain like level of fee. It's hard, when you make the movie. And the Blumhouse movies, you basically get no fee. Basically, nobody makes any money up front on those movies, and the crew get
Okay.
paid next to nothing. But in success, the movies, everybody gets paid and stuff. But the Blumhouse, what I think people don't necessarily realize is it's sort of a volume business. There's a ton of movies they make that don't get released, or that just like they have a really interesting model, not just making movies cheaply, but they feel like they will make a movie and then they'll have a cut of a movie, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to greenlight it to see if we're going to spend any more money on it. So there's a number of
Okay.
movies that they either abandoned or they had this deal with Netflix for a while where a bunch of stuff got just put to Netflix. I've had people, there were big movies. There was Joe Carnahan had a movie that he did for Blumhouse
Wow.
called Stretch with like Ed Helms and Chris Pine. Doesn't matter if it doesn't test well, and they don't feel like they can do well off of it. Straight to either Netflix or something else. I don't know. Or they'll do very limited releases. A thing of horror films. Yeah, but there's stuff that never really sees the light of day. But the ones that hit are big hits and it's great. But they basically they make a bunch of movies and they winnow down the ones that are going to be that they think will be successful.
Okay, so the ones that really come to mind are those successes, like you say, and that's why, at least to my perception, they're always hits. But many of them, like you said, go to Netflix or direct to DVD. So
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you for clearing that up for me, and I'm sure a few others. But have you ever tried to like trace a fad or a trend with producing? Because it seems like a lot of production companies and just the film industry in general tries to. Do you try to avoid that, Ethan, when choosing projects? Like,
Um.
yeah,
No, I know what you're saying. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, you want to obviously you want to strike while the iron is hot, and you want to put out a film. It's hard. It's harder to do it with movies, anyways, because of just how long it takes. I mean, we did this movie Superfly, and it was the shortest turnaround we've ever done on a feature film. It was with Sony, and it was we the movie was greenlit in October, and we shot it in January, and it came out in June, and
wow,
like that was the fastest turnaround I've ever done. And even then, and we were trying to I think get in on kind of the popularity of Atlanta and that culture. I think we were able to get that to a certain degree. But no, I think it's tough to chase trends because ultimately you're always going to be behind. TV, you can maybe do it. TV, the turnaround is so much faster that maybe you can do it. But yes, we've definitely tried. Um, when I was that movie, first movie I worked on when I was just an assistant was House of Wax. They cast Paris Hilton in it because she was coming off she was popular reality star. Like, oh, put Paris Hilton in it. And because you do want to make a splash, you do want to find a way to, it's a popular new term, to eventize the movie. And how do you separate it from all the clutter? One way to do that is some kind of big, even though it may not necessarily be good for the film, it gets people talking. And so yeah, I think certainly I've been involved with movies where you chase trends, um, but I think generally you'll always lose if you do that,
yeah. I'm not
just
the
because
biggest fan
it's
of
how
the House
can
of
you?
Wax, but
Yeah.
the stage production, or not the stage production, the just the production design for the House of Wax and
Hmm.
the very end is amazing. So
They burned that stage down. That sound stage was in Australia when they were filming the end of that movie. And the house is melts and burnt is on
that
fire and
looks
all that.
awesome.
The fire got out of control and like the entire sound stage burned down. Everybody was fine, and some plucky crewman grabbed the grabbed the camera and got the footage. But yeah, that was wild. I woke up to like reading about that. It was like ruh. But yes, it's a fun movie. I actually think it's a fun movie. I think it holds up. That was the first movie we did with Jama, and then he did Orphan, and then he did Unknown, and then we did Nonstop with him, and then he went on to do like 5 other Liam Neeson movies, and then he just did Jungle
Now he's doing
Cruise.
Black Adam, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Now he's doing
So
Black Adam after that. So
yeah, you've seen his birth kind of in the
Yeah,
film industry, so
yeah, no, and he's great.
very cool. Uh, Another question is I have kind of concerning Superfly is I kind of knew before doing research for this, but Future was a producer on
Yeah.
Superfly. So that's one of my questions is what is the difference and how's the role change for like an independent producer like Future since he isn't a part of Silver or any other major production company as far as I'm aware of, and the role of a studio producer like yourself, like on a project like Superfly.
It's there's two kind of sides to your question. So in that movie, Future, we brought him on because we thought he could, help us. One, which he did find, really great music and artists for the film, and also just help us in terms of making sure the movie we're making was authentic. Which is why we hired Director X, who did an awesome job on it. To make sure that it wasn't just a bunch of Hollywood schmoes. That there was some actual kind of like honesty to the world, even though it was a heightened, flashy, caper, crime action film. Um, so yeah, Future's role primarily on that was helping on the music side, promotional, but that is just as if not more valuable than somebody who actually is on set making sure this or that or the other thing is working properly, and overseeing quality control. Um, but in terms of a studio producer versus an independent producer, a studio producer is, like on the bigger movies, on Sherlock Holmes or whatever, on things like that. It's really interfacing with the studio, which is the one who's, you're using their money, and and just making sure things are moving forward, making sure that the there aren't any major issues, but the studio is a great safety net. Like when you're making an independent movie and you're an independent producer, like it's just you, like that's it. And we found on some of these smaller movies that we've been trying to do that there is so it's easy for things to fall through the cracks that I'm just used to on like giant studio movies. There's a whole department that takes care of doing like rights clearances or that takes care of doing you know making sure the stills were approved or things like that. So it's just being an independent producer. While you have more freedom and autonomy, and you don't have you don't have to answer to anyone, it's also really tough because you have to do everything. You don't have any of these other, the whole studio apparatus behind you.
Okay. So for being an independent producer, you've done that before your work at Silver Pictures, correct?
I've worked as an independent producer, and even on movies now, any movie you make kind of outside the studio system is independent. So there were
Okay.
like, even the Nice Guys,
I
was a
just saw that
movie.
yesterday in preparation, so
Oh, good.
sorry to cut you off.
No, no, it's fine. Like even the Nice Guys or Suburbicon, those were independent movies. They were high level, high budget independent movies. But again, and ultimately we sold them to to a studio, for distribution. But they were like independent movies, and so yeah, there's just the onus is on you a lot more on those versus again something like Sherlock Holmes or Book of Eli, where you've got you have somebody to fall back on, but you also have that person looking over your shoulder. So that's the trade off.
And how are they independent? Because like you had Joel Silver as a producer, as far as I know, right?
Yeah, independent is independently financed as opposed to studio finance. So the like
Yeah.
Suburbicon was fully financed. Um, it was this company called Black Bear. This financier named Teddy Schwartzman came in, put up all the money for the movie, and then he sold it at the Berlin Film Festival, and now he was able to sell it, for a lot of money, and so he actually was already in profit. But it was not studio money, and then it was and then the money that was raised was used to finance the picture. But it wasn't, and it was studio level people making it, but they were
Okay.
not. But there was no studio financing. Same thing with Nice Guys. There was a producer named Ken Cow who came in, wrote a check, and and then we sold Warner Brothers domestic, but he sold the rest foreign, and again was able to already be in the black before we started rolling.
Wow. Okay. So the only difference is that the money comes after and not before, but it comes from the same place usually.
I would say the money. No, the difference
No.
is the money on a studio film is comes from Warner Brothers. It comes
Okay.
from it comes from Paramount. It comes from Sony, Superfly. The Sony paid for the whole thing. It was their money. It's their movie. They own the movie. Independent movie, generally like we had a co-ownership stake in like Nice Guys. Ken Cow
Okay.
had an ownership stake. We had an ownership stake. But we owned the movie. Warner Brothers, even though they distributed it, they just paid a fee to distribute the film. So they don't control it. They don't own it. It's owned by you
So
or
that's
by the
why, yeah,
financiers.
you had more control
Yeah.
and Joel had more control
Yeah.
on My Nice Guys.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for
Yeah.
clearing that up for me.
Yeah. No, it's I never fully understood it, but independent is really just outside not financed by a studio. So independent movie can be like Nice Guys was $45 million or whatever, or it can be like Seance, the one we just did, which was money, a little bit of money raised by a little bit of our money, a little bit of money from a couple other companies, and then some from foreign sales. So and then for like $2 million.
Thank you. And my next question is, what other duties do you perform as the head of production at Silver Pictures aside from your duties as a producer? Or am I just crazy and those are basically the same role?
They're somewhat interchangeable.
Okay.
The majority of the work is the same. There's more managerial stuff for staff, and dealing with just kind of basic office stuff that it comes with the job. But no, for the most part, it is kind of one and the same. And it's trying to just basically every day, trying to put movies together and keep it all moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. So, thank you for clearing that up for me. I kind of thought that was a questionable question. Just to
No, no,
okay.
it's like there are some people that are just that's just more specific to me. There are people who I think are sometimes just more managerial, um, and aren't don't go on set on movies and don't do some of the more nitty gritty stuff. You
So,
know,
but you try to go on set for all the films you are actively working on.
yeah, maybe not the whole time, but
Yeah.
yeah, I like to. I think it's I think it's important one to show your face so people know who you are and and recognize that you're in charge of the movie. But two, just to see how everybody's doing and make sure that that things are moving forward. Because at the end of the day, it's if something goes wrong, it's your fault. So
Yeah. So I was wondering, how do you decide what projects you work on personally and what projects you delegate to others? Because I was reading that you were pretty active on the script for Sherlock Holmes 3. And is that correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So why didn't you just find some other screenwriter that you're pretty close with to hand it off and say, just give your crack at it? So I was wondering, yeah.
On that one specifically, we had tried a number of writers, and they'd come up with some really interesting stuff. Um, but ultimately, Downey had a very specific idea in mind, and instead of having those other writers kind of try and chase that, what Lionel Wigram, who is the producer who kind of originated the franchise, um, he was like, "Why don't we just sit with Robert, hear what he wants, not unlike what I did with Denzel Washington, on Book of Eli. See what he wants, and then just do that, and like just do it in a way that will hopefully make him happy, but knowing also what we know about, film production, how much things cost, and knowing what the studio expects to try and make it also manageable from that standpoint, from logistical and financial standpoint, kind of thread that needle. So that's what we did on that. But in terms of like delegating projects,
Yeah.
it's sort of just here's what I would like to work when I like to work on, and if there's one I don't care as much about, I will hand it off. Or if it's something that somebody else brought in, if a colleague brings something in, then I'll just let them run with it and just try and help them out. But it's their project at the end of the day.
Are you confident that we'll see Sherlock Holmes 3 someday, Ethan?
I'd like to say yes. We're coming up on 10 years since the last one, but I think so. Look, we got very close right before the whole pandemic. We were pretty close. And then who knows now? We'll see what the shape of the world
Do you
is.
like the script at least?
I do. I do. I think it's a lot of fun, and and I'm sure there'll be further iterations. I'm sure they'll bring in other people to do more work on it, because that's just the way things are, and that's fine by me. But yeah, I'd love to see it. I can't wait. I'm dying to see it.
Same here, Ethan. Loved them since the first one. So my next question is, how do you balance your career as a writer and a producer? So this kind of tied into the last one, but I'm assuming that your producing career comes first. But
It does.
yeah,
It does. That's what pays the bills. If I am able to write, if I find time to do it, I will. It's hard to though. It's hard to carve that out because at the end of the day, after working all day, the last thing you want, even though it's again, I'm not mining coal or anything, but at the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is like, all right, now let's dive into this script. Um, so it's tough. I thought honestly I would get more done during the pandemic than I did. I think maybe a lot of people feel that way. I really thought I was gonna like, oh, I'm gonna finally write this script and that script, and I'm gonna do this and that. But it's tough. It is tough to do that after even though again I'm just working from home. Um, the but I do still like writing, and I do hope to get back to it. And look, it's nice when the kind of the twain can meet, and it can be for Sherlock, where it's like something I enjoy, but it's also something that's for the company and benefits the company. Um, but yeah, hopefully I'll get more into it. I need to create a schedule.
yeah. So do you have like a list for all your ideas that you want to someday write? Like, how do you organize your thoughts like that as a writer?
Yeah, I do. I have like a kind of a file that just has story ideas and anything that comes into mind. Or there's also a lazily just emails where I've sent myself ideas, and I try to put keywords in there that I'll understand later after when I wake up the next morning. Um, but yeah, I wish there was. I probably need a better organizational structure for it. It might help me out.
Yeah, that's one of my issues, but I think over COVID I've remedied that. So thankfully, but hopefully you find your way on that subject. But my next question is, what? This is kind of cliche, but what makes you wake up in the morning, like as a filmmaker? Is it just to get these phone calls done and get this project made, or like what makes you wake up in the morning as a filmmaker in that way? Like,
Look,
yeah,
sometimes dread,
yeah,
knowing the day that I face, and knowing I'm gonna have to get into screaming matches with people, and knowing that this is gonna be a slog. But sometimes it is. But at the end of the day, it is really because I like movies and I like TV, and this is the kind of the advice I give to everybody is, you do it because you love it, do it because you really love telling stories and working with folks, because it's don't do it for money because it takes forever for like any kind of real money to come in. I mean, my story I like to tell is like um, my first year out here when I was reading scripts and doing temp work, I made $12,000. So like, which at the time I was like, that's great. It's more money I ever made in my life. And so and it was fine, but just living off ramen and and hanging out at home, not unlike now. Um, but I so the thing I'd say is like it's tough. It grinds you up. It's constant rejection, no matter what part of the business you do. If you're a writer, constant rejection. You're an actor, constant rejection. A producer, constant rejection. Even when you're a studio executive, constant rejection because you're trying to get stuff done. It's a little easier for them, but it's still tough. So you have to do it because you like movies. Because there are other jobs that will pay you more money, and you can work regular hours. And when you clock out at 5, you don't have to think about it anymore. Like this, you never stop thinking about it. You never stop thinking about it. You're always like, ooh, what if I did this? Ooh, I gotta call this. Ooh, I'm gonna email this person. Ooh, let's do this and that. Like even as you fall asleep, like there's so as long as you know that going into it, that is what I always say, and that's honestly still how I operate. I think if it ceases to be fun, if it ceases to be enjoyable, and I don't like the people I work with, and I don't like the projects I'm working on, then yes, then I think that you have to start considering why you're doing it.
and that hasn't happened yet for you, right? You
No, I
haven't
really
lost that
like it.
passion.
I mean, maybe there have been maybe a moment or two of, where I've like it's like just forget this, but no, yeah, it's I really I dig it. It's fun. Again, you get to meet great people. I've been I had the opportunity to make movies all around the world. Like we made movies, a bunch of movies in London, shot a movie in Barcelona, shot a movie in Albuquerque. Uh, it's been it's really cool. Um, so I love it. And I cannot. When I was younger, when I was a kid, I was always like, well, if the movie business doesn't work out, I always have a great fallback, which is I will just run a chain of Blockbuster video stores. But I can't do that now, so I have to make this work.
No fallback. That's not the best idea, Ethan. I have to think. But with COVID and everything, like you said a few times already, it's kind of unavoidable. But how has it changed your role as a producer? Is it just these kind of virtual meetings? But and you've talked about a bit on set with the orphan, but how else has it changed your daily operations?
In many ways, I think it's made people more receptive um, to calls and Zoom meetings and stuff like that. I think people have become easier to get a hold of and easier to hear back from. Sometimes, it used to be it'd take you a week to hear back from somebody. Now you hear back, in an hour or two. I think people are, excited to have purpose in their lives, and so they're trying to keep that going. And so I've actually set up a number of things this year and put things together. I think more than I may have had there not been a pandemic. I think maybe because people are less distracted and they are forced to focus a little bit on work, and also it gives them a reprieve from their home life a little bit. Um, and the best thing for me is I added it up. The time that I didn't spend driving around LA was 15 whole days, 15 whole 20-hour
Holy
periods.
crap.
Was not spent in the car this year of time. So commuting and stuff. So even that, just from from mental health, was great. Um, but yeah, I think at least in Hollywood, people were. It was in some ways easier to get stuff set up, and also because you couldn't make movies, the only proactive thing people could do was develop and set up projects and tee things up for when we all are able to go back to work full time.
I've never like that's one of the things I never considered about COVID with the film industry is just the amount of time that it's saving people like you with those 15 days. So hopefully you spent those 15 days wisely.
I hope
um,
so. I think so.
that's a huge amount of time. Crazy. Oh my gosh. And do you see any of the changes that you made during COVID just carrying over after COVID is hopefully uh, solved? And like, will you continue virtual meetings like this? Because they may save time on occasion.
hmm I think that what this has shown is yes, it is not necessary. It is not necessary to go into the office every single day and work in an office. Obviously, I'll still do it and meet people in person because I think there is something about just meeting with someone, looking them in the eye, and being able to have a laugh and all that. That and that connection I think is important. Um, but I do think that it will that you definitely see more of this kind of thing. You'll definitely see more of out of office and home office stuff. Yeah, I just think it's that is a natural evolution of what we're doing. So I think people realize, hey, we we don't all need to all go in the office all the time. Like, and conversations we would have, me walking over to the next office, I can just dial them. It's fine. It doesn't change anything. Yes, we can't sit in the office and shoot the breeze, but sometimes in a way that actually, is more efficient. We both just want to go on with our lives.
We have another question from Daniel Hollis, and he says, if we have time, we'll find time for you, Daniel. Would you have any advice for an independent director writer looking to get their story produced by a studio like Silver? So, Ethan, what advice do you have for Daniel?
I would say, well, first off, just for clarification, so Silver is just a production company. It is not necessarily a studio. A studio is is Warner Brothers and like kind of these bigger entities that actually have financing and distribution apparatuses. So we're just a production company and we are hired. We do have some money that we can put into films, but our job is to be kind of the actual like people who put the movies together and produce them and then kind of give them over to a distributor or studio. But what advice would I have? Um, there's a number of ways in. Obviously, cold calling. Cold calling agencies. The agencies still accept unsolicited submissions. Most production companies and studios don't. Most just for legal reasons because they've been burned so many times by someone saying, "Oh, I sent you the script and then you made this movie and it was similar to it and I'm suing you now." Basically, for legal reasons, most places don't accept submissions that are not from either someone they know, an agent they know, a lawyer they know, or someone who works in the business. Um, I get unsolicited stuff all the time, and it's tough because these are people who really want to, just like I was, want to get their work out there. And how do you do it? Often there's ways to do it through your school. There's programs that you can do it, especially if there is someone from your school who, like, we've got two people from BU, so they like will read anything that kind of comes from BU students and anything that uh, but I would say agencies and management companies, the big agencies being CAA, WME, UTA, ICM, um, to another lesser degree Paradigm. Uh, these places, they'll accept submissions. They're always trying to find new people, so they will read stuff for you. But yeah, I would say also entering contests, anything you can do to get yourself kind of known, or just have a little like kind of bona fides, bona fides. I don't know how it's pronounced. I've only seen it in writing. I don't know how it's pronounced. Um, but yeah, I think anything you can do for that. I wish there was like a simple way. Like if you have something like I'm happy to take a look at it. Um, but it's for whatever that's worth. But yeah, it's like it's tough. There is no kind of clear way other than contest, going through your school, or or reaching out to agents and managers. And you can find out online what agents rep who, and you can reach out to them directly, and they'll tell you if they're reading, and if they're not, hopefully they'll probably tell you somebody you could go to and talk to about
And oh, never mind. I have one other question before anyone who else who has questions is watching, send them in. But until then, what parting words do you have for any aspiring producers, especially who are currently listening? So, anyone in college who wants to be a producer, similar to your position, what should they do to have their odds raised to be a producer?
it. Well, first off, I'm sorry and congratulations for the profession you have chosen. Um, I would say, look, you're already doing it, so you already kind of know the nuts and bolts of it. So that's great. I would say, getting an internship at a production company, I think is a great way in. A PA gig, I think is a great way in. Working at, I know a woman who began working just in production offices, and now she's like a UPM on movies and is a physical producer on films, and has worked on a ton of big movies. But she just started by working in the production office and working for the line producer and worked her way up, doing that. I would say that's the way to get your foot in the door. I think is just do it. It's funny, Shane Black. When we were doing Nice Guys, he spoke at USC, and somebody says, I want to be a writer. How do I do it?" He goes, "Oh, just start writing." And they're like, "No, but I want to write something." He goes, "Oh, okay. Well, open your computer and start writing it. That's it." And so to be a producer, you're already doing it. You're producing movies. You're producing shorts or little commercials or whatever you're working on. You are a producer, and I would say that already is something you have on your resume. And so when you go to a production company, go to a studio, to try and work there. The other thing the other thing I would say, and this sucks, and I didn't do it, but a lot of people did it, and they're very successful for having done it, is go to work at one of the agencies. It is a grind. It is you start in the mailroom, and then if you do well there, get paid minimum wage, and maybe it's a little more now, but next to nothing, um, and you can get an assistant job, and then hopefully through that you can then parlay that into a gig at as an assistant at a production company or somewhere else. But a lot of people have done it and have had great success doing it. I didn't do it. I occasionally have regrets for not having done it because it just you build an instant network because you're constantly calling people for your boss and calling other agencies, calling everybody at studios, calling other, so you instantly build a network of people who are around your age and around your same like level of desire, or goals and skills, and you can make build out a huge network very quickly. And as I say, I think that is one of the hallmarks and necessities of being a movie producer is just knowing people and being able to pick up the phone and call somebody and having them call you back. Because you can call anybody, but having them call you back is the important part.
Definitely. And with those agencies, you said it's kind of easy to get a job just in the mailroom. Like,
I don't know if
is
it's
it?
easy because a lot of
Oh,
people are
okay.
trying for it,
A lot of people
but
trying for it.
it is the easiest job to get at an agency.
Okay. Okay. And what's one of the examples of those agencies? Just for
So
the unaware.
so Creative Artists Agency, which has been
Okay.
around since the '80s and was a spin-off of William Morris, which is now William Morris Endeavor. It was two agencies that combined,
Okay.
um, and they're a big one. Pretty much all your big actors, writers, filmmakers are repped at one of those two places, or UTA, United Talent Agency, or ICM, International Creative Management, and then again to a lesser degree, Paradigm, Gersh, APA, places like that. Um, and a lot of writers and actors and filmmakers start at smaller agencies and kind of work their way up through them. But I recommend it. I recommend working at an agency. Again, I saying this having not done it, but I know a lot of people who it was terrible to while you were there, but they learned a lot very, very quickly. You listening on these phone calls, you see how movies get put together, and see how agreements get made, um, and all the kind of finagling that has to go on a constant basis. And you meet a lot of cool people that hopefully you can help them, they can help you, and you just build out your network quickly.
And our last question for the night is from Daniel once again. And he says, having worked on so many films, do you think it is feasible to produce big budget films in places other than the hotspots like LA and New York? Or do you think that the talent funding is exclusive to these places? So, just saying, like, Ohio, like, is it possible to produce a film in, like, Ohio? So,
Sure.
do you
I
think?
mean, I know. I think you can. It's kind of two different questions. I think
Yeah.
you can definitely make movies anywhere, and you can have major kind of film centers. Like Atlanta has become a major film center, and New Orleans, and again Albuquerque. They build all this infrastructure, and the government creates these tax rebates, which make it very attractive. Like nice guys, we got 30% back of our spend. Because we got back $15 million. Like that's very helpful. Well, it's nice to be able to do that. And I do think and it brings in a lot of work into the state, and all the Marvel movies are done there, and to your point, like the first Avengers film, a lot of it was shot in Cleveland, um, and a lot of the New York stuff was shot in Cleveland for that movie, and and I know that Netflix has shot a few things there. There was this is Anthony Mackie, Frank Grillo film called Point Blank. Was shot and set there. So I think you definitely can um, you make movies kind of anywhere. To the other question, I do think there will always be kind of epicenters, just where everybody is, where all the kind of executive base is, and maybe COVID will change that to a certain degree. But I think it's always going to be concentrated in a few places because at the end of the day, you still do have to go sit down with people and hammer things out. Um, Certainly on the executive level. And I was talking to a filmmaker who is an Australian guy, and he originally was just kind of coming in and out, would pop in, but he felt like he just it's out of sight, out of mind, and so he actually ended up getting a house. He and a couple of Australian friends ended up getting a house like in Laurel Canyon that they will just, and so they'll stay in LA for a few months at a time to be present, and then to be there for meetings, and make sure you get those jobs.
Okay. So, thank you. So, do you recommend to producers, like, it would help their careers a lot, early on to maybe come to LA just to maybe get work in one of those agencies
If
or
you want
anything
to,
internships like that?
yeah, I would say, well, if you want to be more on the kind of side of the business that I'm on, which is which is more the kind of executive side of producing versus the physical producer, which is like the line producer who, you know, is more kind of the again, the boots on the ground, kind of, he's the sergeant. They're like the sergeant to you, um, and they keep things kind of, keep everything moving. Uh, that I think you can probably do if like productions, if you are in one of those places like in Atlanta, enough productions come through. I don't think you ever have to go to LA. But if you want to do kind of what I'm doing, where you interface with studios and studio executives, and need to meet a lot of people, then yes, I think you need to come to LA or to New York, maybe more for television. But yeah, I would recommend it. I know I know it costs a lot of money and it sucks, um, but I just think then it gets you out there. And by the way, worst thing you discover, and also best thing simultaneously, is hey, this isn't for me, and then you've done it, and you're like, oh, and there's no shame in that. Again, I thought I was going to be a director, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be a director, and that's okay. Like, and if you find out you don't like doing it, that's okay. You can, then now you know, and you gave it a shot.
Thank you, Ethan, very much for your talk today and to everyone. I'm sure everyone in the comments would be applauding right now if we were in person. But one final question is, do you believe that you'll once again be the champion, hold the championship in the movie trivia showdown this year?
100%. Yes,
I never doubted
definitely.
you, Ethan.
I definitely will. I look, was a real bummer looking back at last year that I should probably have beat Dan when I did. Yeah, yeah. I probably my biggest regret is not is and I thought about it just the other day. I was like, I should have gone for 3 points on the should have gone for 3 points on the the whatever the betting round. So that is something that haunts me, because I was like, oh, I could have won. I wouldn't have had to go to sudden death.
And
Um,
those who don't know, that's a really cool way to just get to know some people in the film industry and just some people who really love film. It's a movie trivia contest, trivia show. So,
oh yeah, check
and
it out. It's
Ethan's
coming
all the
back.
stars. The
Yes,
Ethan Big Time
I
Perfect.
was once upon a time one of the victors. But yeah, no, check it out. It's fun. It's a bunch of good people, great personalities. Like Kevin Smith just joined and is starting to play. Chris Jericho just joined and is starting to play. So yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan. We have two guests next week and two really cool guests. And we're having guests all throughout the semester. And we're starting big with Ethan. So just like Big Time, his name of the showdown. Daniel Hollis says, thank you for your time, Ethan.
You
We
bet.
all
Thank you.
thank you, Ethan. So that's it, everyone. And yeah, we're very glad for everyone who came to watch Ethan and for Ethan for coming and taking time out of his day. So have a great day, everyone, and